Hey friends, it's Cassie. Welcome back for another Trinity Stamps video. Today we're going to be making a slimline card, and I wanted to show you the products we're using. We're using this adorable Just Keep Swimming stamp along with the Hugs and Squishes stamps and dies. I just love those little frog people on there, so awesome. And then yeah, there's their matching dies. We also have the 6x9 Waving Hello stencil. I have some watercolor paper and a bunch of Distress Oxide inks. So I've pulled out a Waffle Flower Media Mat, and then I'm just going to put down some of the color. That first color is Speckled Egg, and then we've got some Tumbled Glass. My Tumbled Glass desperately needs its re-inker, but I don't have one, so we're going to make do. And all I'm doing is taking that paper and squishing it into the wet ink. So I'll put a little bit more down. I'm going to dry this first because Distress Oxides will layer on top of each other beautifully. And in order to do that, you want to make sure they're dry. So then I'll spritz some water on that color that's on the mat, and then just kind of pounce my paper into it, and you'll notice I get this fun background. All right, now on top of that, I'm going to use the Waving Hello stencil, and we're going to do some ink blending. So I'm going to just tape this watercolor paper into place, and the watercolor paper that I have, I've cut that down to 3.5 inches by 8.5 inches, which is typically the front for me of a slimline card. This first color that I'm grabbing is Broken China, and I'm using my little blender buddies to blend my ink on there. And you know, I'm not being perfect with how I blend it on there. In some areas it's a little darker, and some it's lighter. I kind of like that look. And then I'll peel that one away, and I'll grab the other stencil that comes in this kit. And it's awesome because they have the embossed lines so that you can easily line that up over what you've just stenciled, tack down your stencil, and then move on to your next color, which in this case is some Faded Jeans. And then I'll grab my blue blender buddy and stencil that on there as well. And again, I'm not being perfect with how I stencil or blend that color on there. I kind of like the variation in the color where some of it's darker and some of it's lighter. But then when I'm done with that, we'll peel away the stencil, and you'll see this really fun background that kind of, you know, resembles water. My next step is I want to splatter some water on there, so I'm putting that on my mat and just picking it up with a paintbrush. This way I'm using, by using a small paintbrush, I'll get smaller splatters. And then I'll wipe up the water and even use my microfiber cloth to absorb that water that's on there. And then I'm also going to heat set it, which will intensify some of the splatter on there as well. I want to splatter some gold on there, so I'm just going to take a little bit of water and splatter a little bit of gold all over that background as well. This is a fun process. Go through your stash, check out what gold paints you might have if you want to add some shimmer. And then that's what I'm doing with that one. I'll show you just how shimmery that is. It's beautiful. Next comes the stamping. So I've grabbed out my little frog people, and I'll put that onto some Express It cardstock along with the Just Keep Swimming stamp. We'll close the door of the Misty, and then I'm going to ink that up with some ink on 3 blackout ink, which is perfect for copic marker coloring. I'll stamp that down, and then I'm going to do it again just to make sure that I have a good crisp image. And then I do end up stamping our little frog guy again as well. So I'll put the colors up on the screen for you, but the way I like to color these stamps that are the big words that are in the Trinity stamp store, which there are so many wonderful sentiments like this, I typically like to do them in an ombre. I've seen a lot of beautiful ways to color these, but this is kind of how I like to do it. And when I'm using my copic markers, I have a brush nib. I don't have like the bullet nib. And so with that brush nib, I'm just trying to stick just mostly to that tip on those words like just and keep, because they are a little bit thinner. I'm going to come in with some BG18. That's a little bit darker than that BG57, and you'll see where it kind of gets a little bit ombre look. And then I'm just sticking mostly to the bottom section of each of these letters. And then I'll take that same BG18 and I'm going to color all of Swimming, because I do have one more color that I want to bring in. And this way it'll make it look like from the very bottom of Swimming all the way up to the Just Keep, you've got some ombre going on. It's not going to be like in your face. It's going to be pretty subtle because of the colors that I chose. But I love coloring these, and I love that they take up like the whole front of an A2 size card. You don't have to do a whole lot extra. but I wanted to add this one to a Slimline, so it was fun to add in my little swimming creatures that would go along with it. And they just pair up perfectly, and in this day and age with everything that's going on, who doesn't need to hear just keep swimming? You can do this. You can do this. All right, so the next color I'm going to bring in is some BG78, and that'll be just a bit darker. And then I will use some flicking motions on the bottom of the word swimming. And so then you'll see that from the bottom up, it goes darker to lighter. I just think that's fun. I mean, like I said, you could color each of those letters a different color if you wanted, but I really enjoy doing that ombre. All right, now we'll move on to our little frog guys. I am starting with some G21. I'm going to put that down as my base. I typically like to color lightest to darkest, so that's the base color that I've chosen. And then I'm going to come in with some, I think it's G84 is the color that I'm going to bring in. G94. And that'll be a little bit darker than the G21. And I'm just adding a little bit of shadowing where I think it would look nice. And then I'll come back in with the G21 and I will blend that out. I'm not going to show you the coloring of the other two little critters because it's the exact same. But we'll just blend that out. And then for his little eyebrows and his lips and his tummy, we're using some YG23 just to bring in a little bit of that yellow green. Now I want to paint those bubbles, so I'm going to bring in that same color that I splattered with, and then we're just going to paint that right over those bubbles. I'm not using a lot of water because this isn't watercolor paper, but I wanted that shimmer on there. I thought that would be a lot of fun. So like I said, check out your stash and see if you have any paints that would work with a lot of shimmer. All right, when we're done with that, we're going to fussy cut out that just keep swimming, which is super simple to do because it's, you know, relatively, there aren't a lot of areas to cut around. This one didn't take hardly any time. And then once we're done with that, we'll use the matching dies for our little frogs. We'll tack that down with a little bit of washi tape and run that through our little mini die cutting machine. And we'll have to do that twice since we have two. I wanted some for the inside of the card. And then we'll start working on our card base, which is some navy cardstock that I've cut down to 7 inches by 8.5 inches. Now I'm scoring it at 3.5 inches. I don't know that there's any real typical like set size for Slimline, but that's what I typically like to do. I'm going to use some foam tape on the back of our sentiment along with the back of one of our little frog guys and our other little frog. We're going to try and center that up just as well as we can using our glass mat. And then I'm going to take the one little frog, the tiny little guy, and we're going to stick him right on top of the letter E for keep, the first one, because it just looks like he's sitting there. It looks cute. And then we'll peel off the release paper of our swimming guy, and he'll be swimming next to the sentiment. I wanted to add these elements to the inside. Off camera, I did stamp and color the Hugs and Squishes that comes from the stamp set, and it also has a matching die. Love that. So I'll glue down our little guy in that lower right-hand corner, and then I'll glue down the Hugs and Squishes, and then I'll glue down our little frog to the top, like he's sitting on that as well. Now I'm going to glue our panel to our card base, and this is a little bit smaller. I trimmed down the edges so that some of that blue would show through, so it would make some of those faded jeans on the background really pop. I decided for embellishment, I wanted to grab out my tidy tray along with the bubble bath flat back beads, and then I'm just going to stick those down, not a whole lot, just a few of them, and I'll glue those down with some Nuvo Deluxe liquid glue. And when those are on there, that is actually going to finish off our card. I did make a matching envelope, and I used the Trinity Stamps Slimline envelope die to go along with that. You'll see that envelope in the picture after this. So if you like this video, go ahead and hit that like button and consider subscribing if you haven't already done so. I really do appreciate how kind you all are. I am convinced that the crafty community is the best there is. I will see you all very soon in another video. Bye, everybody.